All right, so I'm Paul Fain. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm your moderator for today. I'm a journalist who writes about connections between education and work. I'm going to go very fast here so we can get into the meat of this. Our time will go fast, as you know. One piece of housekeeping, as you may also know, we got to clear out of here quickly after the event, so please don't linger too long here. So I'm just going to go down the row and do names and titles and get right into it. To my immediate left is Tim Taylor, the president and co-founder of America Succeeds. To his left, our newest panelist, Michael Bettersworth, the founder of SkillsEngine and the chief marketing officer of the Texas State Technical College System. And to his left, Joshua Broggi, the CEO and founder of Woolf, the world's first global collegiate university. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Angela Jackson, founder of Future Forward Strategies, a labor market intelligence design and strategy firm. So every conversation I have had at this conference in some ways touches on skills. Skills-based hiring, verifying skills, how employers can hire based on skills instead of degrees. So this is the topic that we're going to discuss. And I have to tell you, I find this one very hard to get my arms around. So I'm excited to hear from four folks who are coming at this from different angles. So I'm going to just start with an opener here. So how do we get there? Specific to non-degree students, the ones that need the most help, folks who are not pursuing the four-year degree. How do we make a dent in the paradigm of the degree as the proxy for employers and for students themselves? And if you could, tell a little bit about what you are doing to help break that cycle. And let's start with Tim.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see that everybody's not burned out on sessions. When we saw our time, this was we were curious whether anybody would be here. So, welcome. I'm Tim Taylor, co-founder and president of America Succeeds. We work with employers, trying to identify their needs and then work backwards into the K-12 system to help sort of align the supply and demand sides of the equation. What we're hearing from employers and what we've been hearing from employers and what you all have probably heard so many times throughout your life, if you can just give me somebody who can think critically, collaborate, I will teach them what they need to know in this role. Hopefully not airline pilots or doctors, but right there is that huge set of great mid-skill, mid-wage to high-skill, high-wage jobs where they can learn a lot of it on the job. And most of us, when we come out of college, I can speak for myself, I was an English major, didn't really have any skills anyway, so learned a lot on the job. Our work has been around what we call durable skills, soft skills, 21st century skills, all the different types of terms that you've heard for that. Employers don't really like any of them, and we were trying to bring employers into the conversation, and so durable skills really helps to monetize those skills and identify that these are the skills that somebody takes with them from job to job, regardless of career, path, regardless of their industry sector, regardless of location, geography, or even their education attainment level. And what we found through an analysis that we did with MC Burning Glass, now called Lightcast, was that across 80 million job descriptions that we scanned that hit the internet, 7 of the top 10 most in-demand skills by employers are durable skills. They're the skills that employers are asking for over and over and over again. And the question into today's, which we will dig into, is how do you validate those skills? How do you measure those skills? How do you teach those skills? We're excited for everybody to have a conversation about that.
Thanks for that. So Michael, as the journalist, I'm going to brag here, who's written the term competency-based more than any other journalist globally, I'm excited to have you here because Texas State Technical College has made some bold moves going pretty far back into this space. Give us a little sense of SkillsEngine in the broader picture.
Sure. So Texas State Technical College, that's my main 9-to-5 gig. SkillsEngine is a division inside of our college. We're a state agency. We're Texas's 2-year technical college system. So by your definition of non-degreed students, those not pursuing 4 degrees, that's what we do, I guess, as non-degreed students.
Stars.
Although a lot of those are associates and certificates. And those are inherently based on skill validation. An important footnote is the TSTC system in Texas, we're a public college. We're paid by the state based on the earnings outcomes of our students. So the more we place and the more they earn, the more our commission. And 100% of our funding formula from the state is based on that model. So that makes skill alignment something that we're very keenly interested in. and the limitations of traditional labor market information, the dreaded SOC code, which is a wonderful tool for large macro labor market analysis, and then job posting data, which tends to be scraping of advertisements, the tip of the iceberg. Neither one of those provide a sufficient level of detail into the competencies and proficiency levels and enabling knowledge, skills, and abilities that instructional designers would know well. So SkillsEngine, we created that to help align our own curriculum. And validation with employers is the cornerstone. Now, of course, with large language models and others we'll talk about, I hope, that's really had a huge leap in innovation capacity that I look forward to talking about.
Thanks for that. Joshua, you're coming at this from a slightly different angle. Give us the skinny on Woolf.
Right, so I'm representing an accredited university, and we're the first global collegiate university that allows other education organizations to join and potentially become member colleges, and then offer accredited degrees. So it's not our obligation to persuade employers to accept unaccredited skills. It's not part of our mission. We actually really view it as our mission to give accreditation to skills training. And so many of our partners are high-growth boot camps doing $100 or $200 million a year and selling skills-based programs that lead to employment. Once they partner with us, they become accredited colleges, and they gain degree granting powers for those skills-based programs. So we're very focused on the credentialing of skills, and that's the direction we've taken the problem, rather than trying to persuade employers to accept unaccredited skills.
Great. Angela, please.
So I'm coming at this from a different perspective in terms of working with actual employers, those who have very hard to fill jobs. So think about healthcare, think a lot of the frontline positions. There's a realization now, especially with this very tight labor market, that they need to hire differently. So they're looking at my peers here and thinking about what is the technology that's going to help them actually do it and do it more accurately. So number one. Number two, what they're struggling with is the middle managers who are actually doing the hiring. Will they believe the credentials? Even when you have the chief people officer that's bought into this concept, even when you have a CEO that's bought into this concept, where the rubber meets the road is that middle manager saying, if I hire this person and I decide not to use a degree as a proxy, will I look bad down the road? Well, what happens if they're not able to do the job? But what we're seeing now, because of this tight labor market, there's a willingness for people to do things differently, and now we just need the technology to actually catch up to that.
I want to stay with you for a second, Angela, and just to talk about risk. I think for students trying to make sense of their options, I mean, we all know more students are questioning the value of the traditional path, but there's risk in trying to figure out what to do as an alternative. Obviously, for employers, lots of big, exciting promises from the C-suite doesn't always translate to HR, and some of that, I think, is risk. Can you give me a sense of how big of a barrier that is and what you see as the best ways to give more confidence?
Well, I think the couple things, and we talk a lot about millennials, when they see these credentials, it's like they're like, show me, don't tell me, prove that this actually has value. And that's a higher burden for institutions of higher learning as well, right? They want to know that they're going to get some type of return on investment. So example, one portfolio company that I invested in is called 20. And what they are doing is a coaching platform they're created by and for people who are in their 20s who are making transitions. When you look at the people who are on that platform, the biggest thing that they're asking about are credentials. Should I get a bachelor's degree? Should I go to grad school? If you went to grad school, they want to know, when did you go to school? They're not looking at reports. They don't want to hear from someone who did it 20 years ago. They want to know from someone who's done it in the last 3 to 5 years, what was that return on investment? And so they're doing a real-time calculation of, do I do a short-term gig now? Do I do an apprenticeship? And is school in that next 3 to 5 year plan? It may or may not be.
Joshua, can you tell me a little bit about how accreditation can de-risk for employers? And you talked about non-college alternatives like boot camps. How does your institution help add confidence to an employer that wants to hire those graduates?
Well, we're a licensed higher education institution like any others, and both employers and governments in general do place a high value on degrees statistically, whether it's matters of immigration or tax, points on your visa, and so on. It's just really important, and you have to persuade a very big audience that degrees don't matter if you're going to go that route. So our own strategy is to de-risk the skills-based training, where that's the main thing, and to search through the data to find what's academically relevant and to pull that out and accredit it. So we consume a huge amount of data coming from skills-based platforms. We benchmark that against regulatory requirements. We don't get to decide what those requirements are for the most part, but where we're able to fulfill requirements, we can issue credits as a licensed higher education institution.
I have to ask, are you optimistic that the American accreditation system can help here?
It's a challenging environment. So you could divide the world between all the other countries and the US when it comes to accreditation, because in most countries, the Ministry of Education defines what the rules are, and then there may be some helping bodies which implement that. But America doesn't have a defined set of accreditation rules. So you have 195 bodies, which are effectively private clubs that have DOE permission to process accreditation. 5 of them are very large and well-known, and then you have a couple of nationals. So that's a much more marketplace-based economy of accreditation. It does mean that there's a lot of conflicts between states and the accrediting bodies, and it's a complex environment to work in, for sure.
So Michael, a lot of things going on in Texas. I know
These are so
SkillsEngine-
many great topics. We could have each one of these as its own session, right?
That's the
keep us focused
ASU+GSV
as well.
challenge here. We could do 4 hours and barely scratch the surface here. But you were working with employers in a high-growth state. You're working with the state. Can you give me a sense of the depth of commitment to using skills instead of the degree?
So I think these topics, we use these very large definitions to talk about students or accreditation, or and you know, Matt Crawford wrote a great book, Shop Class as Soulcraft. How many of y'all read that years ago? It's a good read again, Shop Class as Soulcraft, because he talks a lot about how we talk about education, we talk about students as monoliths, and they are not. There's this great diversity of dispositions, and that's why we have so many different accrediting bodies, and it's good that we do. We want to be federated in a lot of these things, because the needs of the employers to hire skills-based, somebody mentioned a pilot. Well, we teach FAA pilots and avionics technicians and nurses and all of those areas that are highly board certified and to certain standards. And then certain other areas are less well-defined, and even the industry certifications are not a panacea because the quality of those is also broad standard deviation. So the answer doesn't have a single, it depends. I hate those answers, but
Fair enough.
From sector to sector. A lot of times it's a relationship sometimes between a hiring manager and an individual department or faculty that's really where it's sacred. So the hiring manager at the F-35 production line that hires our avionics technicians, they come to every career fair. And they know that the curriculum and our brand is there. So much of that is beyond, yes, you have to have the FAA components. Those really tight transitions, those talent pipelines that are not technology-centric, but people and relationship-centric are really key, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in the outliers of those to build systems and models around.
Great, thank you. So Angela, I want to give you a chance to respond to what you've heard there before I turn to Tim and assessments.
Yeah, thank you for that. So the question I'm noodling here, and I don't know if you all are thinking about it, is what weight does accreditation or will accreditation have for the students themselves in the next 5 years? Because when you think about online learning, right, you think 8 years ago, 10 years ago, it was not something you did, it wasn't taken seriously, it wasn't a good school. More and more we're seeing that, right? It's becoming normalized. You know, it's maybe not Ivy League, but it's up there and it's respected. What happens to accreditation from the learner's perspective? Are they going to continue to see the value in that beyond some of the specialized professions?
Please jump in, anyone?
Well, we have to see what student behavior is, and so for the many thousands of students we have enrolling, I know that if we offer a program which is unaccredited and one that's accredited, the conversion rates into the accredited program are dramatically higher, the price that they're willing to pay is dramatically higher. It's a hard battle, particularly if you're intending to move across borders to choose to do a program and not have a bachelor's degree. It's a real privilege to have a degree, and it's an elevator to the middle class. We see our highest growth in countries like the Philippines, India, West Africa, Eastern Europe. These are places where the total number of 18-year-olds moving onto the market is going through the roof, and their ability to now purchase bachelor's degrees is unprecedented. So I think it's a real opportunity for better or worse. You have to persuade the whole world that bachelor's degrees don't matter. And it's much easier, I think, to use technology like a kind of TurboTax for accreditation to be able to ingest all those benchmarks and make them more easily available to organizations like boot camps.
Michael, you look like you want to say something.
Oh, gosh. So much of this debate between bachelors or this or that, it's a false dichotomy. There's a broad demand of different kinds of skill sets. Bachelors, I have liberal arts degrees, they're very valuable to me. And I also have some technical knowledge as well. And so, again, it's not that one is better than the other. They all have different purposes and places. And different occupations have different levels of entry depending on their skills and depending on their hiring requirements, some that are legally bound and others. So it's just not, it just depends so much. I'd also say, how many of you looked, and this is, I'm not one to pick on you, I don't mean to be argumentative on this, but how many, I can tell you that when I went to—
I think the statistics are quite clear on your lifetime earnings depending on your education and degree outcomes, for better or worse.
It's a correlation, because we can also look at petroleum engineering's bachelor's degrees and art humanities, and it's a broad standard deviation. The whisker bar charts on those are important to look at, and so much of our National Center for Education statistics at their conference many times publishes averages. Publishing averages creates this false narrative that the level of education dictates earnings. It's lazy statistics, not directed at you, that's directed at NCES.
We can always take a shot at NCES. So Tim, if you want to demonstrate skills, whether you're a high school student, you know, there's some news yesterday, if you didn't see it, ETS and the Carnegie Foundation moving to introduce kind of assessments instead of grades for K-12 and beyond. Your work, some of it, is grounded in assessments. And can you just give a sense of how to do that with durable skills?
Yeah, so one of the questions we get all the time is, can you assess these skills? And we believe the answer is clearly yes. The question that precedes that for some folks is, can you teach these skills? And our answer is obviously yes. What we've done is we've partnered with CompTIA. If anybody's familiar with that organization, they're the second largest certifier of technical skills behind Microsoft. So if you've heard of C++ or Python+, or right, they do cybersecurity. They've been approached over and over by their customers to say, it's not enough for somebody to have the technical skills. Is there some way that you can validate that they have these durable skills at the same time? So while we were doing the research nationally, they were hearing from their employers, and we've now partnered to create, first, what you need is a lexicon, a shared lexicon around what everybody means these terms are. And so we've brought over 650 employers together to have a common lexicon around what somebody should be able to know or do in their first or second job. The second thing that you can do once you have that lexicon and the lexicon and those terms is then you can build an assessment off of that works across the board. So it doesn't matter whether you're in manufacturing or whether you're in healthcare or whether you're in tech around these durable skills. The question is, can it be reliably validated that we all understand what we mean when somebody can think critically or collaborate or assess risk? And that's the spot that we're at with CompTIA right now, is to figure out what that assessment looks like and ultimately build that assessment and then use it for individuals to be able to enter the workforce, to be able to demonstrate, here are my strengths. These are a bunch of skills that we practice throughout our lives and nobody's great at all of them. But to give people the vocabulary and that shared understanding of what they're good at gives them the opportunity to get into jobs that might not have been otherwise available to them. And we think that's an important gate to be able to get opened. And then the second component of that is that we're going to build it back into the education system. But we're starting with the employers, we're starting with the terms and the things that they want, and then we can build it backwards into the education system instead of vice versa.
I think the only thing that I worry about there is, and maybe CompTIA has it, is bias mitigation. So even when you talk about durable skills, how someone will display those skills has a cultural context behind it. So there's a company out there, Arena Analytics, that does just this. So they're thinking about how do you assess the skills, but then also how do you account for culture? It's very nascent technology, but I think it's not enough. We're not seeing enough of that.
Tim, I know you've done some work to that end, and it's not done, but could you?
Yeah, so we partnered with a group called Common Group that does human-centered design research, and we are very much aware of the opportunity to do this poorly, and that is we are doing everything we possibly can to to rule out those things, right? If what happens is somebody's looking for communications and that means they don't want anybody who has an accent, we've really done a tremendous disservice to what we're trying to do, which is to create economic mobility and to get people into these jobs. So we have a very intentional approach to that. We're doing everything we possibly can, but it's a great and valid point.
Obviously risk in that, and privilege tends to replicate itself. So Michael, SkillsEngine is part of this conversation, obviously, and I wonder what your take is on the 1,000 points of light. Lots of different, hopefully interoperable systems that do this, or some real biggies, and what's needed there.
So you're talking about the whole skills taxonomy infrastructure?
Yep.
Lots of, yeah. So we've got many different initiatives going around the country related towards taxonomies and skills. There's a joke that Mark, the founder of IMS Global, that's now called One EdTech, on their case standard that I love, and it's a comic strip, and the first cell is two industrial organizational psychologists, and they're saying, you know, there are 12 different skills taxonomies in the world today. It's really a problem that there's not a unified skills language. We're going to fix that. And the next cell is the kind of Calvin Hobbes working bubble, right? And then the next cell is, great, we've solved it. Now there are 13. Okay? So that's what's going on. We have a continuation of different skills ontologies and taxonomies, and now with large language models just baking in all of that information, it's really completely, a bomb has gone off in skill standards, taxonomies, and all of these things. It's completely changed the game. Anybody doing pitches tonight, you know, slide 4 on your market threat analysis, you should probably throw that away if it hasn't been updated for this. So, I mean, our work at SkillsEngine, and again, it's not a for-profit company, it's a division that we started to try to solve this. Once it has its market sustainability in its model, then we'll bring it out into its B Corp or whatever it is, but we're self-funded and we're good. The goal for that is skill validation. Right now, lots of colleges and employers do a lot of competency modeling and skill analysis. It's in a vacuum, it's in their own HRIS, it's in their own systems, massive duplication of effort. Our first iteration of SkillsEngine assumed that level of privacy. So we had colleges around the country creating skill profiles for accountants or welders or whatever it might be. And they're isolated. They're not talking to one another. So this next iteration, which is in a private beta coming out soon, basically democratizes that. So think of instead of one Wikipedia, that you can have as many Wikipedias as you like, as many skill profiles for whether it's a competency like project management or an entire occupation or sector. And using some of the LLM and some of the AI models, we're able to make them talk to one another. So the idea is an easy button. Nobody likes to do job analysis work. It's so boring. You know, sorry, industrial organizational psychologists, but it's not a great, it's a very tedious. It's massive duplication. We also learned that educators don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time on this kind of work, which could be a reflection of their level of concern about the employability of their students, frankly. And I come from an education, perspective. I'm sensitive to it. But the level of effort that's involved in really looking at your curriculum at a competency, learning objective level to determine its market relevance, and then having the commitment to get rid of that slide that you've used for years, that you spent so much time on, right? Finding out what to teach that's new is very easy. Getting rid of stuff that's relevance is faded is really difficult because of sunk cost fallacy. So these are some of the issues that we're wrestling with. Yeah, the technology and the taxonomies are important, but boy, these human factors of motivation, and you can have the best taxonomy and the best algorithms and the best data in the world, but you have to solve problems that people actually care about and are willing to spend some time with. And that's where I think a lot of these national standards that have great aspirations really have to start with the hiring managers and the people on the grounds that somebody has to update that syllabus, somebody's going to update that posting until AGI, and we have takeoff, and then none of us have to do it, right?
Yeah, and hopefully we'll solve the AGI question in a second here. So Joshua, can you give us a global lens on some of that? I mean, is the Tower of Babel of skills taxonomy a challenge in your work?
It's an interesting situation. So one, we're a very international organization. The majority of our students are outside the United States. The rates of enrollments are very, very high and growing. As a collegiate university, we're growing by 1 to 3 colleges per month, and so we're aggregating new colleges at a fairly rapid pace across the world. We do a lot of work that's not just bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. So some of it is simply tracking data from unaccredited programs that are then articulated into accredited programs. And so in that case, the unaccredited content ends up being an exemption for credit towards an accredited program. That's a very popular one with us. In fact, the majority of our students today begin in an unaccredited program somewhere and have that content tracked against accreditation requirements into a degree. Another thing we do is stackable credits, so we do end up with smaller outcomes, such as postgraduate certificates, which are about a third of a master's degree, or PG dips. But what we consistently see for those who want international mobility, those who want job mobility within a large corporate employer, like a publicly traded company in India or something like this, they want a degree, whether it's a bachelor's degree or a master's. And overwhelmingly, whether they like it or we like it or not, that's the thing that has the most economic impact on their career. And so that's ultimately what we end up supporting.
Angela, I wonder, you have a broad view of the non-degree players in this country, and also the way students are looking at those options. Just once more on the accredited versus non-accredited, the credit bearing versus non-credit. How hopeful are you of translation of that kind of non-standard learning to getting credit?
So I think there's a couple of things that I'm seeing in the field right now, and this goes back to the employers. They're needing to look at other ways to verify training, because the way that technology and jobs are changing, we know that it's happening at light speed. You've heard of Moore's Law, what would happen every 2 years. With technology now, you see how the technology is growing. So some of the skills that we say are even durable, how do they manifest in jobs that have not even been created yet? That someone in a university is not even teaching about that subject or that job role. So again, when you're looking from a student's perspective, they're saying, maybe I could learn that online. Maybe that is a short burst program. And for an employer, looking at accreditation, they're also looking at what's extra. How are you telling me what's relevant today to the job we need to fill now, and actually prove that you have some type of work outcome, some type of product to show that learning?
So let's try to do a little bit on AGI here. If y'all haven't seen it, Sean Gallagher at Northeastern has a really great market scan of this space out today. A lot of things hitting this week, ASU+GSV. But he talks a little bit about the potential for AI to change the game here from an employer standpoint, to do more with skills validation. What's your take, Tim? What are you hearing from employers, or whether this will affect your work in the near term?
Yeah, I've got tons of great anecdotes from a bunch of different employers. I'm trying to figure out which one to share with you. One of the ones that I think is super interesting is that, one, we can also track that the amount of durable skills rises as you begin to take degrees out of job descriptions. So as you move towards more of a skill-based hiring, what employers are looking for are more of these durable skills. Part of the problem as you start to get to skills-based hiring is how you validate any of these skills, both technical and durable. And without calling out the company, a large company moving towards skills-based hiring that does some of their own training, they do the training with a group of individuals. The student gains a skill or a certificate, and then what the company is telling them to do is, when they apply for the job, to actually cut and paste the job description and put it on the bottom of their cover letter, so that it can actually get through the hiring bot. So they get past the 4-year degree requirements, which the bots are looking for, and they can get through to the other side because they hit all of the other requirements. So as we move to skill-based hiring, there's all kinds of things that we're going to have to solve for on technical skills, on durable skills, this move, right? And the company, which they just happen to mention that they use Workday, so a big company, but there's not enough companies moving that Workday is incentivized to go back and change the way that they're doing all of it.
Is
right?
that true? Because I've heard that very question a lot here this week. Like, why can't, if I'm going to bank on anything, it's going to be Workday or LinkedIn solving this. But the companies aren't pushing enough?
I think we see the swell coming, but I think it's right, the swell is building, and they're going to have to respond at some point. But right now, it just hasn't hit that.
Yep.
I mean, This is growing. I still think this is the leading edge on a lot of, right? So much of this we're trying to figure out, and we hope we get more right than wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely right. So I was with a large insurance company last week, and it was the same thing, and they talked about Workday. They're looking at working with more startup organizations that are willing to play nice with their other tech stack and share data, and actually willing to be more custom so they can get the data out and actually begin to use it. And it is a problem now until you get a critical mass that would want someone like a Workday to do this. The information's there, it's not being shared, it's just not being looked at. So, and that's the unfortunate part, that it is available now. We could do it if we had the will.
Michael.
I just want to double down. I mean, the HRIS vendors and others that they've had a lot of competency and skills-based infrastructure in their tools for a long time, but the customers don't use them, right? The hiring managers and HR folks are too busy. HR is notoriously risk-averse. They've got a heavy plate. They don't have a full staff to do detailed competency modeling. So it's not Workday or HRIS vendors' faults that they don't have robust, competency skill. They actually have built that infrastructure, and the market has spoken. We don't have time for that. They want easy buttons. And that's where the AGI and LLMs actually enable easy buttons, right? So now we can build a complete career progression in a matter of moments. We can take all of those job descriptions and say, great, what's my progression plan? So now, the legacy software vendors in general that have their existing engineering teams dedicated to their roadmaps supporting their existing products are in big trouble. If you're not doing acquisitions or second rounds to build a second engineering team to integrate around these things, you're going to be caught in the wake. It's just that we're in the midst of a massive revolution across all of these systems, and the legacy enterprises are going to have a hard time, right? And especially with a lot of bespoke, customizations built around some of these systems. So, wow, we're going to see just huge, innovations that are happening. And I'm not going to bash on any of those vendors or their UIs.
If you want to, you can.
Stop the
it's just you and
scroll.
me.
Stop the scroll. Anybody use Workday? Stop the scroll.
I'm going to comment on the scale of this too and the speed at which this is happening. So there are now 8 states, I think New Jersey's the latest, somebody just told me about the 8th one, that have now removed a 4-year degree or degree requirements from their state hiring systems, right? So they're saying, and they're not going to be the last 8, right? And Georgia has a piece of legislation that's going through, and they've been very candid about this, right? They had 25% turnover in state jobs in the state of Georgia. The answer to get rid of the degree requirement was not to ensure that they had greater equity in the workforce. I wish that was the case, but they're trying to solve a problem. What we're hearing from some of these states is that they're letting each of the divisions, so commerce and transportation and agriculture and each of these, they're saying, well, you guys have to figure out how you're going to solve skills-based hiring in each of, anybody think that that's a great idea? Right, we don't have a lot of confidence in some of the ways that government is handling a lot of things. And then now we're going to up the stakes on hiring and getting more people, more qualified people to create paths to success through this. Those innovative solutions have got to come, and they've got to come fast.
Angela, want to respond to any of that?
Well, when you talk about the innovative solutions, I'm thinking about employers who are leading on that front. So, first one that came to mind is thinking about IBM and what they're doing. What I really appreciate about that is that they're being willing to open and to share the information. We've got several employers who are leading. We have a lot of others that need to catch up. And I really feel like it's going to be the employers who want to play nice, who want to open source their material, how they're thinking about it, to really take the lead in that space.
Agreed completely.
Okay.
And I mean, IBM with their talent frameworks, they purchased that decades ago, and it's a pretty robust, taxonomy of knowledge, skills, interview questions. I wish I'd open source that. Actually, it'd be wonderful to put that out there into the world, because I don't think it generates much revenue, probably. Well, their buy button has been broken for about a year on the website, so I'm guessing it's not really Okay, but this topic of skills-based hiring, we're talking about it rather loosely, and I've heard it defined as, well, that just means you don't put a degree requirement on it. Is that the level of, is that when we say skills-based hiring, there's a continuum that seems to be there, and there's a lot of statistics on skills-based hiring is on an uptick, but the operational definition is not putting a degree requirement on there. Now, I'm hiring a chief of staff, by the way, okay, and so I put on there MBA preferred. Why? If I don't put MBA preferred, there are a lot of people with MBAs that don't apply for jobs in their search. Only show me jobs that mention MBAs, because they know the hiring power of that is going to signal them a better job. So not putting a degree requirement at least, and a lot of the machine learning that scrapes those things won't know the difference between preferred or required, by the way. They'll just say it has it on there. So there's these generalizations about, quote, skills-based hiring that I think we're categorizing very broadly.
Joshua, globally, are you seeing countries where there's a dramatic difference in the approach to skills-based hiring, or is it similar to what you're hearing here?
This all sounds very optimistic, to be honest. And so most of our students are in skills-based programs, and we ingest a huge amount of skills-based learning data. And what we're able to do with it is accredit it, because overwhelmingly, skills arguments are arguments and explanations. And if you're explaining, you're losing. And it's just much easier to issue credits and give the students degrees. And so we give them degrees, and it solves a huge host of problems from visas to employment.
All right, so our final question, ASU+GSV 2028, what are the levers that need to be pushed by then to really make this happen? To make this not a theoretical conversation where we're seeing massive scale. Tim, lucky you can start with that.
I was really hoping to go last. I think there's obviously a bunch of things that are going to have to go right to get this to go smoothly. We're certainly betting, I guess at America Succeeds, we're certainly betting that creating the common lexicon on what somebody should be able to know and do is one of the biggest things as it relates to the durable skills. And I think being able to measure and validate these durable skills and give folks a chance to lead with the types of skills that they have and have sort of both sides of the coin, so they're not using a 4-year degree as a proxy for durable skills, is one of the ones that we think is super important, and we're going to put our money behind that one.
Gotcha. Michael, you're next.
That's a broad question. I mean, the levers to solve for what exactly? What are the...
Scale, reality. Yeah.
Scaling what? I'm sorry.
Pick a lever that would make SkillsEngine used far more than it is today.
If more of education cared about the employability outcomes of their students.
And I love the brevity too. That's good. Joshua.
Well, we're automating much of the data processing related to skills. So we have millions and millions of skill learning events that we're processing at any given time and turning them into academic credit recognized in 50 countries.
Excellent.
I'm thinking the skills conversation is very broad. It's always to what end? I think the change will happen when we have employers who are thinking, how do I assess what a person can actually do? They're looking at a degree as a proxy and a skill as a proxy for a job. We need to give people an opportunity to actually demonstrate, right? And how do you assess that they're able to demonstrate that they have the expertise to do the job that you're hiring them for? That takes more time. We're not there yet. So now it's a degree, then it'll be certain skills, but at the end of the day, we still don't know if that person can do that job. It's only a bet that we're hedging.
Tim, you want a last word since you had to go first?
No.
Well, you know what? We're going to end early. Thank you so much. Please give a hand of applause to